Greetings and welcome to Fiddle Tune Favorites Episode 6, a federally unrecognized initiative devoted to documenting the musical phenomena emerging from America's least exotic river systems. Today we set our sights on Big Sciota, a mighty fiddle tune named after a somewhat less mighty river in Ohio. Living proof that great art sometimes doesn't come from dramatic or beautiful inspiration, sometimes it comes from flatland and corn. As always, we'll attempt to reconstruct this tune's murky history with a mix of good old hearsay and regional folklore. Then we'll move on to the chords, the melody, and several interpretive variants that are destined to ignite spirited but civil discourse. Big Sciota, sometimes pronounced Big Scioti, Big Scioti, Big Sciota, or Big Coyote, depending on who you're arguing with, is a traditional fiddle tune from the Appalachian region of the United States, we think. Just so you know, I'm about to do my best at pronouncing a bunch of Native American words, and I apologize to everyone. The river's name comes from the Wyandot word Sciota, meaning deer, a term also found in other Iroquoian languages with various pronunciations, such as Shenandoah, which you may recognize from another famous river turned folk song. European settlers, demonstrating their usual linguistic precision, shortened these words to Scioto, and then mispronounced their own mispronunciations for the last several centuries, just like I'm doing now. The Sciota River also carried a far more serious role in history. It served as a path along the Underground Railroad. Escaped slaves crossed into Ohio and continued north along its banks, with many riverside towns functioning as safe havens. So yes, originally named for the many deer that would drink from the river every spring, the Scioto River eventually became a mispronounced road to freedom and the inspiration for a bluegrass fiddle tune that hipsters in Brooklyn can play on their Instagram stories. Shout out to all my fans in Brooklyn. How you doing? Hope your Instagram stories are doing well. The earliest well-documented source for this tune is Burl Hammonds of Marlinton, West Virginia, whose various recorded versions suggest that even he wasn't entirely sure how the tune went, though he is sometimes credited as the composer. Field recordings by various folk historians in the 1970s captured different takes by Burl, each with small mutations that were revised and curated by various performers as the tune became standardized. So is Big Sciota a West Virginia tune? Is Big Sciota an Ohio tune? It's hard to say, but Big Sciota is one of the most overplayed reels in modern bluegrass jams. If there's one thing bluegrass learners love to do, it's learning the melody of a fiddle tune without learning how to play the chord changes. The problem is, if you jam with other people, guess what? You have to know the chords. For every one time you play the melody, you have to play rhythm for everyone else. So let's not let all those people down. Big Sciota is a G major tune, so we're sticking with an open setup today. No capo, standard boom chuck rhythm. We're playing G, C, D, and a little bit of E minor. Let's slow Strum Machine down to 85 BPM. I'll show you a rhythm chart. Let's learn how to play those chords.
4.
Here comes that beat part. Okay, before we move on, we do have to talk about a handful of harmonic variations. That means different ways that people play the chord changes. So let's do that first. In the A part, some folks will play 2 quick D chords in that first line. These help to define phrase 1 and phrase 2, but they're not required. Some folks prefer the less segmented sound of 4 measures of straight G, which is how we just played it. The next thing I want to talk about is in the B part. You see how between the first 2 lines we move from C to E minor? Well, some folks do that in the opposite order, as in E minor to C. Sometimes this is explained as a difference between bluegrass and old-time interpretations of this tune, but if you were at the jam and you said, let's do the bluegrass chord changes, you're still likely to get half C to E minor and half E minor to C. So it's become commonplace to just announce which way you want it when you call the tune. For instance, you could say, let's do big Sciota, C to E minor. The last thing is the end of the A part and B part. The tag phrase normally has a 5-1 motion happening in the chords, but exactly where those chords are placed can sometimes be debated. For instance, we just learned this passage as G, D, G, but some folks will also play this as equal groups of D and G, or they'll put the D chord in a different spot. All of those variations are valid, and in fact, I normally play it with that D chord a little bit later, but for some reason, I'm seeing lots of people posting this way online, and if this is the way the community is going, then I'm going to teach it to you that way, but once again, your mileage may vary. The trick is listening to everyone at the jam to make sure y'all kind of agree on the chord changes for this particular moment. As guitar players, we tend to have a little more sway in that conversation, but it's important to not be unwilling to compromise. So make sure to listen to other folks, look at their hands, and make sure you agree on the chord changes. Now for the good stuff that y'all came here for, the melody. The version I'm about to teach you can find at lessonswithmarcel.com in a tab book called Marcel's Essential Fiddle Tunes. You can get that for free, or if you're feeling generous, there's a little field where you can toss a tip in there, do whatever you want. If you want to play the real complicated, crazy version that I played at the beginning of this video, you can find that in Marcel's Excessive Fiddle Tunes. That has significantly harder arrangements of all these fiddle tunes that we've taught in this series. All right, now let's talk about how this melody works so it'll be easier to learn. We'll start with the A part. Like most fiddle tunes, this part breaks into 4 neat phrases. Usually phrases 1 and 3 are twins, phrase 2 connects them, and phrase 4 ties a bow on the end. We've seen that in almost all of the other fiddle tunes we've covered in this series, but that's not how the A part of Big Sciota works. In this tune, phrases 1 and 2 are the same, and phrases 3 and 4 are unique. Knowing information like this always makes these tunes easier to memorize, and it makes it easier to decode other arrangements of this fiddle tune. Sometimes people go to great lengths to try to hide the fact that phrases 1 and 2 are the same in the simplest version of this tune. As always, your pick strokes matter. Down is on the downbeat, up is on the upbeat. Get that right, thank yourself later. I repeat, don't ignore the pick stroke symbols. This one means push your pick towards the floor. This one means push your pick up towards the ceiling. By the way, some of you have asked me where these symbols come from and why we use them, and they're bowing notation for orchestral instruments that guitarists have co-opted. So the way it was taught to me when I was in orchestra in high school is that the bracket represents the end of the bow. So a down bow would start at the end of the bow like this. Now that little pointy symbol represents the tip of the bow. So an up bow would go like this. Sorry if you're confused by these symbols. I get that it doesn't make sense, but they're standard at this point, so there's nothing we can do about it. So with all of that pointless knowledge out of the way, let's play the A part.
4.
If that was too fast for you, no worries. You can always slow this video down. Just hit the settings wheel and change the playback speed. I won't take it personally. Now let's talk about the B part. The B part consists of 4 unique phrases. However, even though no phrases are repeated, you'll notice that phrases 1, 2, and 3 are all constructed the same way. The first measure focuses on a melodic chunk, and the second measure focuses on chord tones. Let's play it.
4.
All right, I want to make sure that you're all getting really comfortable with this tune before we move on to variations. So let's play this whole thing together with 2 A's and 2 B's. Remember that you can slow things down, try to get your timing to match mine, and also you can practice your rhythm playing if you want. You can just play rhythm along with me in the backing track. So let's do it.
4.
Another A. Here comes B. I mean, I don't know how you actually did, but I assume this, it's an online lesson, so I'll say, good job. All right, let's get fancy. So I'm going to show you 4 different ways to play each phrase in the A part and the B part so you can build your own personal version of Big Sciota. Remember, we learned last time that with 4 choices for every phrase over 2 A's and 2 B's, that nets us a cool 4 billion different combinations. So you don't want to skip this part. All right, so first we're going to look at phrase 1 and phrase 2 of the A part. There's the way that I taught it to you originally. You can see that I trimmed off the pickup going into the next phrase. All of the pickups have been trimmed from all of these phrases. The first thing you might do is simplify it. And a couple people have asked me, Marcel, why are you teaching simpler versions when we go to the variations? This is a really good thing to look at when you want to create your own variations. The very simple version of the melody is like an undecorated Christmas tree. Now you get to hang all of your cool ornaments off of that simple melody. Now lately I've been playing this really odd blue note riddled style with a bunch of strange intervals and stuff. And I wanted to include one of those examples because that's what I played at the beginning. But yeah, here's an example of how I've been playing lately. And of course, you could always take a simpler approach and you could play some kind of arpeggios. I think I saw an arrangement from Andy Falco that was kind of like this, but I don't remember what it was. So this is my version of Andy Falco's version. Moving on, we can now look at phrase 3. Now this phrase is interesting, right? It ascends up and it lands on C chord tones. The chords change to C and we land on some of those chord tones. So all of these phrases should also do that. Here's how I first showed it to you. Now because we're going to shift up anyway, we might shift up earlier in this line. I've also changed that drone to something a little more interesting. It sounds like this. You hear lots of players do things like that. Now let's look at another more bluesy approach. This one is changing our G chord into a G7 chord by including that note. And then really clearly spells out the C chord at the end. That's sort of a salty sweet kind of situation. And lastly, we'll look at a chromatic variation. Chromaticism is all about getting to your target. Chromaticism really likes to land somewhere. So let's see if we can create a landing. See what I'm talking about? All right, last up for the A part is phrase 4. Phrase 4 is all about wrapping things up, tying things up with a bow. So all of these phrases should feel exceptionally resolved. This 4th phrase is exactly the same as the 4th phrase in the B part. So these variations account for phrase 4 in the A part and phrase 4 in the B part. Here's the first way that I taught it to you. You can also play it with thirds. That's a really fun phrasing technique. And of course, we got to do another one with blue notes. So let's do that. That's fun. And here's some more traditional language. Might sound something like this. Now, it should be becoming obvious how many different ways you can actually play Big Sciota. Take this as inspiration to not get obsessed with the first way that I showed it to you, because all of these variations are just as valid as that first way that I showed it to you. Anyway, let's look at the B part now. So looking at phrase 1 of the B part, here's the first way I taught it to you. Now, that 8th note line in the first measure could get more interesting, and also instead of playing boom chuck in the second measure, maybe I could do a rhythmic motif. That one's actually exceptionally common these days. I don't know who made it cool, but it is cool now. You could also fill those chord tones with other things though. Maybe you cross pick instead. That would do the same job of telling everyone about the chord in the second measure. Now there's one more thing we got to talk about. Lots of people play this B part up the octave. I actually normally don't, but I'm going to show it to you because it's really common. So for each one of these phrases in the B part, we're also going to have an up the neck option, and this one looks like this. Moving on to phrase 2 of the B part, this one follows that same logic. Remember, we have a melody in the first measure, we got a chord in the second measure. The way I taught it to you is like this. But you could have that rhythmic motif like we talked about before. You could also cross pick like we talked about before. And lastly, of course, you could play this up the neck. I might do it like this. Now let's talk about phrase 3. This one follows the same logic, and I taught it to you like this. Remember, we trimmed off that pickup. So you could do it with a rhythmic motif like we talked about. You could do it with the cross picking. And of course, you could also do it up the neck. Now, we don't have to talk about phrase 4 because we already covered that when we were doing the A part, but I do want to say something about phrase 1, 2, and 3 of the B part. Now, you can mix all of those together except for the up the neck ones. If you're going to do the up the neck approach, I suggest you play all of those in a row. I know that cuts into our 4 billion combinations, but I'm sure you'll do fine without all 4 billion this time. Also remember that studying these variations and creating your own variations is how you stop reciting these tunes and you start actually interacting with the community, because this music and this tradition, it dies if we don't keep playing with it, if we don't keep literally fiddling with it. Remember, there's no right version. There's just your version, my version, and the Brian Sutton version that all my students won't stop playing. Anyway, make something new, record it, post it, tag me. I want to hear your big Sciota. Don't forget, you can grab the tab for the version I played today at lessonswithmarcel.com. It's in Marcel's Essential Fiddle Tunes. And if you want to take a look at the big boy version I played at the beginning of the video, that's in Marcel's Excessive Fiddle Tunes. We've also got hundreds of free Bluegrass tabs. Of course, we got my signature guitar pick, and even private lessons with real humans. We have yet to roll out our AI teaching program. Just kidding, we won't do that. Don't forget to subscribe, and please tell me what tune you want to see next in a comment, and I'll see you next time.